For our next presentation, we're going to be hearing about magic around building brands. And to talk about this subject is Alex Gordon. So if you can please join me in welcoming Alex to the stage.
Thank you.
Right there for you.
Thanks so much. Hi everyone, good morning, thank you for joining me. It's lovely to be here from rainy London. Thank you for coming along to the session today. My name's Alex Gordon, I'm the founder and CEO of Science Salad. We are a cultural foresight and semiotics agency. Applying the learnings of cultural insight ensures greater brand effectiveness. It's a key way to win in crowded categories. And understanding how cultural change affects your brand can magnify and sharpen its difference, its distinctiveness and its relevance. A key way of tracking that cultural change, of the emergent codes, of understanding the emergent codes of culture, is by investigating the way that imagery represents and expresses that change and creates new meanings. That is, as you know, it's called semiotics. That is the science of how signs create meaning. Let's demonstrate how we do semiotics every day. You'll be familiar with this. What's happening in this house? Someone shout out, no trick questions. Party, thank you very much. Wonderful. What you did there was a semiotic analysis. You deduced that the balloons on the door were a sign representing a celebration taking place, making that house different in that moment from every other house in the street. We do this every single day. We are all semioticians. We do it instantaneously, we do it irresistibly, we do it unconsciously. Because essentially, that is how we operate. We interpret signs and symbols to create meaning in our world. We are unconsciously in that moment drawing upon a vast reserve of cultural knowledge that we accumulate throughout our lives. Semiotics helps us to reveal the connections between everyday signs and this cultural knowledge which impacts our response to a brand. And everyone in the world knows that there's a party going on in this house because it's a universal symbol. By putting the balloons on the front door, an incredible cultural transformation has taken place. An alien from Mars looking at the front door with balloons would think it essentially strange because there's no intrinsic relationship between the balloons and the front door. It only becomes familiar to us when we are told, usually as children, that this means there's a party happening. And then we see the image repeated frequently in the same context so that we draw an intrinsic and unconscious association between the balloons and the front door and a party. But crucially, the combination of the balloons on the front door transforms something very familiar and ordinary, the functional entrance to a home, into a mystical site of celebration and a threshold for everyday ordinariness turned into a magical space of delight and emotionally heightened excitement. So building a relationship between the strange, the familiar, and the mystical is what I believe successful consumer brands and brand owners do, or at least should be trying to do, to simultaneously simplify and mystify the brands to make them optimally culturally effective. This comes from early in the 20th century when anthropologist Horace Minor and later Nobel Prize novelist Toni Morrison described the role of the anthropologist and of the novelist as familiarizing the strange and mystifying the familiar. They were both referring to the process of observing everyday human activities which have become normative practices like washing your hands or using cutlery at meal times. They're symbols. And through analysis and explanation, we can unpack their strangeness to make them clear and understandable. At the same time, they both showed us how this process also simultaneously helps us to understand that these activities of washing your hands and eating with a knife and fork are filled with mystery, which makes them extra engaging and more meaningful. In other words, washing your hands is not just to be clean, it's to purify your soul, not just clean your clothes to your hand. Out damn spot, as Shakespeare put it. In the 21st century, we can apply this principle to understand the success of leading brands. Nike, for instance, eschews its brand name on its retail stores in favor of a logo which clearly demonstrates the power of the strange, familiar, mystical triple equation, as I'm going to show. First of all, let's deal with the strange. Assuming we have no familiarity with this brand at all, what's the weird image seen outside retail stores globally? Is it a tick? Is it a tick for good homework? Is this a school, therefore? Is it a practical tool for showing us the direction of travel towards the right? Is this an abstract work of art? Its strangeness is disconcerting and discomforting. But the familiar is when, upon knowing and understanding that it's a sporting goods brand, we can understand it represents functional speediness that the athletic apparel, from sneakers to clothing, can give us, and helps us achieve our sporting goals. It signifies the practicality of the brand's products to make us go faster and achieve a greater level of performance. But that's not all it does, because the swoosh also creates mystery. It signifies how Nike gives you the superhuman power to overcome the limitations of the human and transcend normative sporting expectation. Like Michael Jordan, it suggests Nike will enable us to fly, which is entirely fitting, of course, for a brand whose name derives from the ancient Greek winged goddess of victory, Nike, or Nike as we now call it. The swoosh is thus imbued instantly then with a religious awe, like the cross, the crescent, or the star seen outside some buildings. The success of culturally effective brands is built on this single structure. 1. Observe normal everyday tasks and activities to examine their characteristics, their needs, their experiences and behaviors that surround them in order to create insight. Again, let's take a brand example. Heinz ketchup, the strange. This is strange because Heinz tomato ketchup is a glass icon of red, slow-releasing goo sitting on the kitchen table. Its problem as a strange, odd, weird paste, the fact that it takes too long to emerge from the bottle, was also its virtue. That signaled its thick, natural ingredient. Chart principle 2. Let's then unpack and respond to this in practical and simple ways, normalizing them and removing their strangeness or complexity to create powerful, innovative solutions. So let's familiarize that weird glass bottle of goo. Heinz tomato ketchup moved from being in a glass bottle to an easy and convenient upside-down squeezy bottle, increasing its usage. The ease and simplicity with which these solutions fit into consumer lives is key to the speed of adoption. And this is facilitated by cultural understanding, that is, integrating the solution into the cultural context of familiar experiences, i.e., tomato ketchup is most frequently used to add tangy flavor in the context of indulgent fast food. So speedy delivery from a squeezy bottle was crucial to satisfy the need for a familiar practical taste and also to meet the conditions of a familiar cultural moment. Fast food needed a fast ketchup. Understanding normative cultural practices in this way creates opportunities for innovation to make a brand more familiar, reducing its strangeness. But then, crucially, to be distinctive, brands must infuse the solution with uniqueness and mystery to create an effective commercial brand. Again, the conscious use of cultural triggers and meanings is a critical part of making the brand mystical beyond the function of the product. And it's critical to creating sustainable longevity, the layers of cultural fit, language, imagery, making imitation harder. So the mystical was created by Heinz, at least in the UK, when they adopted the strapline "grown, not made," and signaled it through an illustration of a ripe tomato on the vine on the bottle. This in turn coded the mystery of fecund nature and of the rich natural flavor of the product. The mystical vision of natural production persuades consumers that Heinz tomato ketchup is better than the commodified own label alternative, and that it is instead a culturally powerful icon of mealtimes as a familial connection for social belonging and also for healthier lifestyles. So what, I hear you say? Well, I believe this creates a framework for thinking about brands through a cultural lens. This is especially relevant in a world where difference is increasingly hard to deliver and most categories are highly commoditized and own label alternatives are high quality and often cheaper, if not always better value. Generally, brands are not considering culture as a magnifier of their distinctiveness. In our experience, all great brands which retain and gain market share have done so because they are culturally relevant. Perhaps they've done so even by default or unconsciously rather than by design. But deliberate leveraging of cultural meaning remains a great unrealized opportunity for brands. Let's think about this. So strangeness delivers a macro worldview of the role of the category, which creates an opportunity to be distinctive and disruptive. Familiarity it creates the practical, effective solutions to people's needs to overcome strangeness. And mystery is the unique way your brand responds to that and builds its own culturally driven world. Let's take, for example, Dove's Campaign for Real Beauty brand, which continues to use disruptive imagery and challenging messaging to keep the original concept alive and edgy. The essence is largely built on cultural meaning, but to stay relevant, there's a deliberate attempt to mix the mystical message of creating and determining an abstract concept like beauty, with lots of functional and category familiar messaging to ensure product credibility, and mixing it with brave, sometimes less universally acceptable messaging to reinforce the brand essence. So let's go back in time then and see the strangeness that I'm referring to. The historical disconnection between the beauty category and how real women felt about themselves. Beauty brands back then were strange because they were not like me. They had created a narrow vision of beauty. The implication was that what you needed to look like was a vision that not as you actually were. The category felt strange and alienating because it signaled that who and what you were wasn't good enough. Along came Dove, and they said something very different. I am really beautiful just the way I am, they said, which was a radical change in the constructions of the beauty category as it spoke to consumers. That was familiar. What became mystical and has become mystical, and they've consistently remystified over time, is that beauty, as they say, for Dove, is wonderfully varied and diverse and can be found in many places and is represented by many people in different ways. Dove gives you permission to be beautiful by looking different in both the real and virtual worlds. Great advertising is ultimately about magnifying the mystification that creates points of emotional connection or perceived difference, the brand's unique essence. Innovation is about re-expressing the category benefits to remystify the familiar. The key is to building brand equity and driving, this is key to building brand equity and driving mental availability. To do this without cultural meaning is impossible, I would suggest. Brands need to be familiar and accessible, leveraging the normative and category building effects to be hyper relevant, but they also need to magnify their strangeness and mystery to be distinctive. Our challenge, we believe, is that brands can use culture more consciously and deliberately to achieve this. Too many brands are doing so by default, not by design or deliberate action. Take as another example of this cultural triple equation, the brand Patagonia. Mountains are strange. They fill us with awe, with terror, and with wonder, but they also invite us to have a go at conquering them, which is an exciting but scary instinct. Patagonia enables us to be emotionally confident in the face of scary nature, which is underpinned by the founder's own personal experience of mountain climbing. The brand's familiarity is built on its product quality and essential pragmatic functionality. They offer a product such as the Nano Puff jacket, which they describe in the familiar way as being warm, windproof, water resistant. But they are also mystical, because their mystery comes from the authentic user-centric worldview of its role as a brand, which can help you to simultaneously conquer and protect nature and mountains, and to reach the summit of the world, to stand on Olympus with the gods. This is an obsession with how the brand fits into consumer lives and aspirational sustainability goals, and how the brand drives micro-innovation around mystical product details, not just warm, resistant, and waterproof, but the Nano Puff jacket uses incredibly lightweight, as they say, mystical, highly compressible, 60-gram PrimaLoft gold insulation, eco, 100% post-consumer recycled polyester with produced with PURETM, etc., etc. The point is that for Patagonia, like others, culture drives strangeness and mystery. And understanding current and emergent culture allows brands to be on the leading edge of the mainstream without becoming niche and without losing relevance for mass audiences or getting left behind as outdated. Culture also drives the everyday familiarity that consumers need, crave even, to feel comfortable and to integrate a category or brand into their lives. Brands that deliberately choose to manage their relationship with culture will create, we believe, a competitive advantage. Sadly, many brands seem to explore culture in an ad hoc way and feel it's an esoteric exercise in exploration or is only undertaken in moments of crisis. It should be, we believe, front and center of any future strategy though, because if you don't understand cultural change, you can't help to build brands which are infused with strangeness, with familiarity, and with mystery. A combination which in crowded categories can give you the competitive advantage of difference, distinction, and relevance. Thank you very much. Don't know if anyone has any questions.
There weren't any in the app.
Okay.
So I will say, I will encourage the audience, if you do have questions, please do find Alex after the session and join me in thanking him again for this really great presentation.
Thanks, everyone.